Welcome, dear friend. I'm so glad you clicked on my book. My name is Elena, and I'm here to whisk you away to a magical world of romance, where love, passion, and a little bit of mystery await. So grab a coffee, a cuppa, or your favorite drink, find the comfiest spot to relax, and let's dive in together. And hey, if you enjoy my novel, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. It means the world to me and helps me keep creating these stories for you. Now, let's begin this enchanting journey.
The Invisible Omega. Chapter 1. The Forgotten One. The cold water bit into Aria's knees as she scrubbed the stone floor of the pack house's main hall. Her fingers, red and chapped, gripped the coarse brush with practiced efficiency. 3 beta females walked past, their boots leaving fresh mud tracks across her half-finished work. They didn't spare her a glance. Aria paused, waiting for them to pass before resuming her task. Invisible. That's what being an Omega meant in the Silver Moon Pack. Existing in the periphery, acknowledged only when something needed cleaning, mending, or serving. "You missed a spot," one of the kitchen workers called out, pointing to a corner Aria had yet to reach. The woman didn't wait for a response, before continuing on her way. Conversation already forgotten. Aria dipped her brush back into the bucket. As she worked, her mind drifted to memories of her childhood. Fragments of a life that seemed to belong to someone else. She had been 5 when her parents died during a territory dispute with a neighboring pack. Too young to remember their faces clearly, but old enough to understand she was alone. No one had wanted to claim an orphaned Omega pup. No one except Martha. "Stand up straight, child," Martha had instructed on Aria's first day in the pack house. The elderly housekeeper's face was stern, but her eyes held kindness. Being an Omega doesn't mean you can't have dignity. Martha had taught her everything: how to cook, clean, remain unobtrusive yet efficient. Most importantly, she'd taught Aria to survive in a world that valued strength above all else. "Did you hear? He's coming back tomorrow." The excited whisper pulled Aria from her memories. 2 young beta females had entered the hall, their voices hushed but vibrating with excitement. "Alpha Mikkal." "Are you certain?" the second woman asked. "Absolutely. My brother is on patrol duty. He got word directly from the border scouts." Aria kept her head down, scrubbing with renewed vigor while straining to hear more. "It's been 3 years," the second woman continued. "They say he's even more powerful now, that he's secured alliances with the northern packs. And eliminated threats from the east," the first added with reverence. "Can you imagine what he'll be like now?" Aria had never seen Alpha Mikkal in person. He had left to strengthen their territory and forge alliances shortly after assuming leadership, before she had been old enough to attend pack gatherings. Stories of his strength, his ruthlessness, his unwavering dedication to the pack circulated like currency. Curiosity flickered within her. What would it be like to see a true alpha? To be in the presence of such power? The thought both thrilled and terrified her. "Don't be foolish," she chided herself. "The alpha won't even notice you exist. And that's for the best." Omegas who drew attention rarely found it pleasant. Better to remain in the shadows, invisible and safe. Yet something inside her, perhaps her wolf, stirred with restless anticipation. As twilight approached, Aria finished the last of her chores. Her back ached as she carried her bucket toward the service entrance. The central courtyard was already filling with pack members, their excitement palpable in the evening air. The pack beta, Lucas, stood on the raised platform, normally reserved for announcements. His commanding voice carried across the gathering. "By order of Beta Lucas, All pack members will assemble tomorrow at midday to welcome the return of our Alpha. Attendance is mandatory. Dress appropriately to honor Alpha Mikkal's return. Aria lingered in the doorway, uncertainty washing over her. Mandatory meant everyone, even her. For the first time, she would stand in the presence of the Alpha. Martha appeared beside her, weathered hand resting on Aria's shoulder. "Best find something decent to wear, child," she said quietly. "Tomorrow everything changes." Aria nodded, unaware of just how prophetic those words would prove to be. Chapter 2. The Alpha's Arrival. The central clearing pulsed with anticipation under the midday sun. Pack members stood arranged in perfect hierarchical formation. Alphas and high-ranking betas at the front, their clothing rich with embroidery and polished buttons. Behind them, the mid-ranking wolves fidgeted in their Sunday best, while the lowest-ranked betas formed the third tier, wearing simple but clean attire. Aria hovered at the very back, partially hidden behind a cluster of young betas. She'd spent the morning washing her faded blue dress, the only decent clothing she owned. The hem remained frayed despite her attempts to mend it, and the fabric had thinned from years of wear. Martha had helped her brush her long brown hair until it shone, tying it back with a ribbon salvaged from the mending basket. "Remember to keep your eyes down," Martha had instructed. Alphas considered direct eye contact a challenge. A hush fell over the gathering. Beta Lucas stepped onto the raised platform, his posture rigid with formality. "Attention," he called, though the command was unnecessary. Every wolf already stood at attention, necks craned toward the northern path. "Prepare to welcome Alpha Mikkal of the Silver Moon Pack." The forest path remained empty for several heartbeats. Then, movement caught Aria's eye, shadows shifting between trees. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, suddenly alert. They emerged like warriors from legend. 6 elite guards flanked a central figure, their synchronized movements speaking of years fighting as a unit. Each guard wore the pack's emblem, a silver wolf beneath a crescent moon, emblazoned on black leather armor. But it was the man at the center who commanded every gaze. Alpha Mikkal stood taller than his guards, his broad shoulders and powerful frame radiating dominance. Dark hair, longer than was common in their pack, was pulled back from a face carved with harsh angles. A scar traced from his right temple to jawline, evidence of battles won. He wore no ornate clothing, only practical fighting leathers. Yet he outshone everyone present. The pack collectively lowered their heads in submission as he approached. Even from her position at the back, Aria felt the wave of his power washing over the clearing. Her wolf whined, urging her to bare her throat in deference to his dominance. Mikkal ascended the platform with fluid grace. When he spoke, his voice carried effortlessly, deep and commanding. "Silver Moon Pack," he acknowledged, surveying his people. "I return to you after 3 years of securing our future." The crowd remained silent, captivated. "The Northern Territories have pledged alliance. The Eastern threat has been eliminated." His words were measured, each statement landing with the weight of hard-won victory. "Our pack stands stronger today than it has for generations." Aria found herself inching forward, drawn by something beyond curiosity. Her wolf pushed against her consciousness, uncharacteristically insistent. "We will no longer be forced to..." Something shifted in the air. Alpha Mikkal stopped mid-sentence, his head turning slightly as if catching an unfamiliar scent. His nostrils flared, and then, inexplicably, his gaze cut through the crowd. Past alphas, past betas. landing directly on Aria. Their eyes locked. The world around Aria blurred. A sensation like lightning coursed through her body, hot and electric. Her wolf howled within her. A sound of recognition so profound it left her trembling. Something ancient and primal clicked into place between them, a connection that transcended pack hierarchy and social standing. On the platform, the Alpha's expression transformed from confidence to shock. His eyes widened, pupils dilating as he stared at her. For a fraction of a second, vulnerability flashed across his features before being replaced by something darker. Disbelief, perhaps even anger. He faltered, gripping the edge of the podium. The elite guards exchanged concerned glances. Alpha? Beta Lucas stepped forward, confusion evident in his voice. The moment stretched, suspended in time. Aria couldn't look away, couldn't breathe. Every instinct told her to run, yet her feet remained rooted to the ground. This connection, this pull, terrified her more than any threat she'd ever faced. This isn't possible, she thought desperately. I'm nothing. An Omega, the lowest of the low. With visible effort, Mikkal tore his gaze from hers. He straightened, jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped beneath his skin. As I was saying, he continued, his voice rougher than before, we will no longer be forced to concede territory or resources. The Silver Moon Pack enters a new era of prosperity. But something had changed. The Alpha's words continued, yet his focus seemed scattered. Twice more his eyes found hers in the crowd, each time darkening with what appeared to be growing fury. Aria wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm day. The inexplicable connection between them frightened her, but more terrifying was the rejection she saw in his eyes. Whatever had just happened, the Alpha was fighting against it with every fibre of his being. Chapter 3. Fate's Cruel Joke. Mikkal slammed the door of his quarters with enough force to crack the wooden frame. Rage coursed through him, hot and volatile. He paced the length of the room, his movements those of a caged predator. Impossible, he growled, hurling a crystal decanter against the wall. It shattered, the scent of aged whiskey filling the air. An Omega? The moon goddess wouldn't dare. A knock sounded at the door. Mikkal snarled. Enter at your own risk. Beta Lucas stepped inside, his expression carefully neutral, despite the destruction evident in the room. He closed the door quietly behind him. Alpha, he began cautiously. The pack is waiting for further instruction after the ceremony. To hell with the ceremony. Mikkal braced his hands against the desk, his claws extending involuntarily, scoring the polished wood. Tell me I'm wrong, Lucas. Tell me what I felt out there wasn't what I think it was. Lucas hesitated, measuring his words. I've served 3 Alphas in my lifetime. I've witnessed many mate bonds form. He met Mikkal's furious gaze steadily. What happened in that clearing? There's no mistaking it. Mikkal's roar shook the walls. She's an Omega, the lowest rank. I've spent 3 years securing alliances, planning a strategic union with the Northern Alpha's daughter. And now fate saddles me with a servant? The girl's name is Aria, Lucas offered quietly. Orphaned during the territory dispute with the Red Claw Pack, she's been raised by the housekeeper. I don't care what her name is, Mikkal snapped, though his wolf whined at the lie. Find a way to break it. Lucas's expression grew grave. Alpha, you know as well as I do. Mate bonds cannot be broken. They can be denied, but the consequences... Find a way. Each word emerged as a separate command. Lucas bowed his head. I'll arrange a meeting with Elder Thea. If anyone knows of a way, it would be her. In the kitchens, Aria's hands trembled as she peeled potatoes, the knife nearly slipping from her grip several times. Her senses felt overwhelmed. Scents were sharper, sounds clearer, as if some dormant part of her had suddenly awakened. "You're going to lose a finger if you keep that up," Martha observed, taking the knife from her hands. The elderly housekeeper studied Aria's face. "What happened out there? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I don't know," Aria whispered. "When the Alpha looked at me, I felt..." She struggled to find words for the sensation. "Connected. Like a rope pulled tight between us." Martha's eyes widened. She glanced around the busy kitchen before pulling Aria into the pantry. "Child," she said, her voice barely audible. "What you're describing sounds like a mate bond." Aria shook her head violently. "That's not possible. Omegas don't mate with Alphas. We barely mate at all." "The moon goddess chooses as she wills," Martha replied. "But Aria, if what you felt is real, you must prepare yourself. This won't be easy for either of you." The pantry door swung open. A young beta kitchen worker stood there, her expression a mixture of awe and suspicion. "Everyone's talking about how the Alpha reacted when he saw you," she said, eyes wide. "Jenna says he recognized you as his mate. Is it true?" Aria's stomach dropped. "No, I don't." But the girl was already backing away, clearly eager to spread the gossip further. Through the kitchen windows, Aria could see small groups of pack members gathered, glancing toward the building while talking animatedly. "I need to hide," Aria whispered desperately. Martha squeezed her shoulder. "Hiding won't change fate, child." Elder Thea's cottage stood apart from the main pack buildings, surrounded by herb gardens and ancient oak trees. Inside, the scent of sage and cedar hung heavy in the air. "Breaking a mate bond?" The elder's weathered face creased with concern as she regarded Mikkal. "In all my years, I've never heard of such a thing being done successfully." "There must be something," Mikkal insisted. "A ritual, a spell, anything." Elder Thea shook her head slowly. "The mate bond is the moon goddess's most sacred gift. To break it would be to defy her directly." She leaned forward, her ancient eyes sharp. "Why do you seek to reject what many wolves spend lifetimes hoping to find?" "She's an Omega," Mikkal said through clenched teeth. "I need a mate who strengthens our pack, politically, who can stand as my equal." "Perhaps," Elder Thea replied. "You should discover who she is before deciding what she cannot be." Mikkal rose abruptly. "This isn't a fairy tale where the servant girl becomes queen. This is about survival." "And yet," the elder said softly, "the goddess chose her for you. There is always purpose in her choices, even when we cannot see it." Mikkal turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. "If I refuse to claim her?" "The bond will remain, growing more painful for you both. It may eventually drive your wolves mad with the separation." Elder Thea's voice held no judgment, only truth. "Some have died from the rejection." Mikkal's hand tightened on the doorframe. "Summon her to my office," he commanded Lucas, who waited outside. "I need to see this situation for myself." Aria's heart hammered against her ribs as she stood outside the Alpha's office. The beta's summons had come while she was hiding in the laundry room, trying to escape the stares and whispers that followed her throughout the pack house. "Enter," came the command from within. With trembling hands, Aria pushed open the heavy door, stepping into the room that would change her destiny forever. Chapter 4. A Marked Woman. Morning light filtered through the pack house windows as Aria made her way down the main corridor, bucket and mop in hand. The familiar weight of her cleaning tools offered little comfort against the unfamiliar weight of dozens of eyes tracking her movement. Conversations hushed as she passed, only to erupt into furious whispers in her wake. Yesterday's meeting with Alpha Mikkal had been brief and devastating. He had questioned her, his voice cold and clinical, about her lineage, her history within the pack, and whether she had used any unnatural means to create a false mate bond. When she'd stammered that she didn't understand what was happening, he dismissed her with a curt order to speak of this to no one. But secrets rarely remain secret in a wolf pack. "There she is," a female voice stage whispered as Aria rounded the corner. "The Omega who thinks she's special." 3 female betas lounged against the wall, their expressions ranging from amusement to contempt. The speaker, Lydia, pushed herself upright, deliberately stepping into Aria's path. "Excuse me," Aria murmured, eyes downcast as she attempted to move around them. Lydia shifted, blocking her again. "Is it true you're claiming to be Alpha Mikkal's mate?" Her lips curved into a mocking smile. "How convenient that you'd recognize him the moment he returns with increased power and new alliances." "I haven't claimed anything," Aria replied quietly, clutching her bucket tighter. "Smart," another beta commented. "Because everyone knows Omegas don't mate with Alphas. It's against natural order." "Perhaps she's confused," the third suggested with false sympathy. "Poor thing probably mistook basic acknowledgement for something more significant." Laughter followed Aria as she finally managed to slip past them. Her cheeks burned with humiliation, but her wolf bristled beneath her skin, uncharacteristically agitated by the mockery. In the dining hall, the atmosphere shifted in an equally unsettling way. A beta male who had never before acknowledged her existence suddenly appeared at her side as she began mopping. "Aria, isn't it?" he asked, his smile too wide, too eager. "I've always thought you did exceptional work keeping our pack house clean. Very thorough." She blinked in confusion. "Thank you. If you ever need anything at all, you just let Damien know." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Those of us with foresight understand that positions can change quickly in a pack." Realization dawned. He was attempting to curry favor, believing she might soon hold influence. The thought was almost as disturbing as the hostility she'd faced earlier. "I should finish my work," she said, stepping back. Throughout the morning, the pattern continued. Some pack members sneered and whispered cutting remarks about her delusion and presumption. Others suddenly discovered her existence, offering awkward compliments and thinly veiled attempts at friendship. A few simply watched her with calculating eyes, as if assessing a potential threat. By midday, Aria retreated to the kitchen, seeking the only person she trusted. Martha was kneading dough, her gnarled hands working with practiced efficiency. She took one look at Aria's face and sighed. "Sit," she ordered, pushing a cup of tea across the work table. "It started then." Aria nodded miserably. "I don't understand. I haven't told anyone about what happened." "You didn't need to," Martha replied. The Alpha's reaction was visible to anyone with eyes, and wolves love nothing more than pack drama. She wiped her hands on her apron, expression grave. "Listen carefully, child. You're in a dangerous position now. But I haven't done anything. Doesn't matter. You've become a focal point in the pack's power structure. Those who've spent years cultivating position will see you as a threat. Those who want power will try to use you." Martha leaned forward. "And the alpha females who've been vying for Mikkal's attention. They'll be your most dangerous enemies. As if summoned by Martha's warning, the kitchen door banged open. Cassandra, daughter of a neighboring pack's beta and a high-ranking alpha female who had been temporarily residing with the Silver Moon pack, stood framed in the doorway. Her golden hair was perfectly styled, her clothing expensive and flattering. "You," she said, pointing at Aria. "Outside, now." Martha rose, but Aria touched her arm. "It's okay," she whispered, though nothing felt okay. She followed Cassandra into the empty courtyard behind the kitchens. The moment they were alone, Cassandra's composed facade cracked. "How dare you?" she hissed, advancing on Aria. "I've spent 2 years cultivating an alliance with Alpha Mikkal. 2 years of diplomatic visits, carefully orchestrated meetings, and political maneuvering. And you think you can interfere? I didn't—" "Shut up!" Cassandra's eyes flashed with fury. "Whatever trick you're playing, whatever you think you're doing, it stops now. Mikkal is meant to mate with me. Our union will unite 2 powerful packs." "There's no trick," Aria insisted, backing away. "I don't want any of this." "Liar!" Cassandra lunged forward, shoving Aria hard against the stone wall. "You're nothing. Less than nothing. An Omega servant playing at being significant." Pain shot through Aria's back, but something else surged through her as well. A protective rage that didn't feel entirely her own. Her wolf, normally submissive and quiet, suddenly pushed forward with startling strength. "Let go of me," Aria said, her voice dropping to a growl that surprised even herself. Cassandra's eyes widened momentarily, before narrowing again. "Or what? You'll clean me to death?" She raised her hand, claws extending. "Perhaps you need a reminder of your place in the hierarchy." As Cassandra's claws descended towards her face, something snapped inside Aria. Her hand shot up with impossible speed, catching Cassandra's wrist in mid-air. Her fingers closed around it with a strength she'd never possessed before. Cassandra gasped, trying to pull away. "What?" Aria's eyes burned with an inner fire, her wolf closer to the surface than ever before. "I said," she repeated, her voice deeper, almost dual-toned. "Let go of me." With a twist of her wrist, she forced Cassandra to step back. The high-ranking she-wolf stared at her in shock, rubbing her wrist where Aria's fingers had left red marks. "This isn't over," Cassandra whispered, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. "Whatever's happening to you, it won't save you. Mikkal will never accept an Omega as his mate." As Cassandra stalked away, Aria leaned against the wall, trembling. The strength that had surged through her moments ago ebbed, leaving her exhausted and confused. Her wolf, however, seemed satisfied, settling back with a contented rumble. Martha appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and something else. Pride, perhaps. "What's happening to me?" Aria asked, her voice shaking. Martha glanced in the direction Cassandra had gone, then back to Aria. "The mate bond," she said simply. "It changes things, strengthens things." A small smile touched her lips. "Perhaps you're not as helpless as everyone believes." Aria stared at her hands, still feeling the echo of that unexpected power. "I'm scared, Martha." "Good," the old woman replied. "Fear keeps you alert, and you'll need to be very alert in the days ahead." From an upper window of the pack house, unseen by either woman, Alpha Mikkal watched the exchange, his expression unreadable as he witnessed the impossible. An Omega standing her ground against an Alpha female. Chapter 5. The Alpha's Rejection. The great hall buzzed with anticipation. Every member of the Silver Moon Pack had been summoned for an emergency gathering, an unprecedented event so soon after the Alpha's return. They assembled according to rank, a sea of curious faces and tense postures. Aria stood at the very back, partially hidden behind a stone column. After yesterday's confrontation with Cassandra, she'd hoped to make herself as inconspicuous as possible. Martha stood beside her, a silent pillar of support. "This doesn't bode well," the elderly housekeeper murmured. Before Aria could respond, the massive oak doors swung open. Alpha Mikkal strode in, flanked by Beta Lucas and the Pack Council members. His face was carved from stone, jaw set in determination. He wore formal Alpha attire, black pants, and a charcoal shirt, beneath a leather vest emblazoned with the Pack symbol. The outfit emphasized his authority, a visual reminder of the power gap between him and the rest of the Pack, especially between him and an Omega. Mikkal took his position on the raised platform, surveying the gathered wolves with cold calculation. His gaze swept past Aria as if she didn't exist. "Silver Moon Pack," he began, his deep voice carrying effortlessly through the hall. "I've called you here to address the rumors that have been circulating since my return." The room fell silent, tension thickening the air. 3 days ago, during the welcoming ceremony, an unexpected reaction occurred between myself and one of our Pack members. His expression remained impassive. Some have interpreted this as a mate bond. Whispers erupted, heads turning as Pack members tried to locate Aria in the crowd. She pressed herself further behind the column, heart hammering against her ribs. Mikkal raised a hand, silencing the murmurs instantly. "I am here to clarify the situation and put an end to speculation." He straightened, shoulders squaring as he delivered his verdict. "While there appears to be some form of connection, I reject any claim of a mate bond with an Omega. Such a union would weaken our Pack's standing and undermine the alliances I have spent years building." Each word struck Aria like a physical blow. A sharp pain blossomed in her chest, radiating outward until her entire body throbbed with it. Her wolf whined, a sound of such profound hurt that Aria had to bite her lip to keep from echoing it aloud. "Furthermore," Mikkal continued, "I am announcing my intention to proceed with negotiations for union with Alpha Thorn's daughter Cassandra. This alliance will strengthen our northern borders and provide valuable trade routes for our Pack." From her position near the front, Cassandra turned, shooting a triumphant smile toward the back of the room where she knew Aria stood. Several Pack members followed her gaze, their expressions ranging from pity to satisfaction as they spotted Aria. "This matter is closed for discussion," Mikkal declared. "Anyone continuing to spread rumors about alternative mate bonds will be disciplined accordingly." The formal dismissal came, but Aria barely heard it through the roaring in her ears. The pain of rejection had transformed into something physical, a burning sensation beneath her skin, as if her very blood rebelled against the Alpha's words. Martha's weathered hand closed around her arm. "Breathe, child," she whispered. "Just breathe." As the crowd began to disperse, many cast curious glances in Aria's direction. Some looked sympathetic, others smug. A few of the betas who had attempted to befriend her earlier now deliberately turned away, distancing themselves from her public humiliation. "Come," Martha urged. "Let's get you out of here before—" "The Omega will remain," Beta Lucas called out, his voice cutting through the noise of the departing Pack. Aria froze, watching as the crowd parted. Through the opening, Mikkal's eyes finally found hers. For a brief moment, something flickered across his face. discomfort, perhaps even pain, before his expression hardened once more. "Approach," he commanded. On legs that threatened to buckle, Aria made her way forward. Each step closer to Mikkal intensified both the pain and, paradoxically, a sense of rightness that confused her further. By the time she stood before the platform, the dual sensations had become almost unbearable. "Alpha," she acknowledged, keeping her eyes lowered as protocol demanded. "Look at me," he ordered. Aria raised her gaze, meeting eyes that burned like blue fire. The connection between them surged, immediate and undeniable. She saw him flinch slightly, confirming he felt it too. "Do you have anything to say regarding my announcement?" His voice was controlled, but a muscle jumped in his jaw. Aria straightened her spine, drawing on strength she didn't know she possessed. The entire pack watched, waiting for tears, pleading, or submission. "I request permission to leave the Silver Moon pack," she said clearly, her voice steady, despite the turmoil within. Murmurs rippled through the remaining onlookers. Wolves rarely left their birth packs, and Omegas, who depended on pack protection, almost never did. Surprise flashed across Mikkal's face before his expression closed again. "Request denied." "With respect, Alpha," Aria persisted, "if you've rejected the mate, bond, there's no reason for me to remain where I'm not wanted. You were born to this pack. This is your home." His tone left no room for argument. "A home where I'll be forever marked as the Omega who dared to think she could be an Alpha's mate." Aria's words were quiet but carried in the hushed hall. "I would rather take my chances elsewhere." Mikkal descended the steps until he stood directly before her, close enough that she could detect his scent, pine, leather, and something wild that called to her wolf. The proximity sent waves of conflicting sensations through her body, the pain of rejection battling with the rightness of being near him. "You will remain in the Silver Moon pack," he stated, his voice lowered for her ears alone. "This is not negotiable." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, Aria saw beyond his cold facade. There was confusion there and struggle, the same war she felt raging inside herself. "Why?" she whispered. "Why keep me here if you don't want me?" Something vulnerable flashed in his eyes before he shuttered it away. "Because I said so," he replied, the Alpha command evident in his tone. "Return to your duties, Omega." He turned away abruptly, signaling the end of their exchange. As he strode toward his private chambers, Aria noticed the rigidity in his shoulders, the slight unevenness in his typically fluid gait. He was in pain too. The remaining pack members dispersed, leaving Aria standing alone in the center of the great hall. The public rejection should have crushed her spirit, yet something unexpected had taken root alongside the hurt. Determination. "Are you all right?" Martha asked, returning to her side. Aria watched the doorway where Mikkal had disappeared. "No," she answered honestly. "But I will be." What neither of them realized was that the brief proximity had only strengthened the bond they both fought against. Like a sapling pushing through concrete, it grew despite all efforts to contain it, drawing them inexorably toward a future neither could yet imagine. Chapter 6. An Unexpected Proposition. A week had passed since Alpha Mikkal's public rejection. 7 days of whispers following Aria through the pack house, of averted gazes and barely concealed smirks. 7 nights of restless sleep, her wolf pacing anxiously within her, yearning for something, someone she could never have. The physical symptoms had worsened. A persistent ache had settled in her chest, flaring whenever Mikkal was nearby. She'd taken to timing her chores to avoid any possibility of encountering him, though her wolf protested this strategy with increasing agitation. This morning found her scrubbing the floor outside the council chamber, a task she'd deliberately saved until the Alpha's scheduled border patrol. The solid oak door muffled the voices inside, but the urgent tone was unmistakable. "Third report this month," a voice Aria recognized as Beta Lucas was saying. "The Red Claw pack is mobilizing." Aria slowed her scrubbing, ears pricking at the mention of the rival pack, the same one responsible for her parents' deaths. How reliable is this intelligence? Mikkal's voice sent an involuntary shiver down her spine, despite the door between them. "Very. Our scout witnessed their warriors training in formation, stockpiling weapons. They've doubled their patrols along our shared border." A heavy thud, likely Mikkal's fist hitting the table. "They wouldn't dare attack directly. Not after the beating we gave them 3 years ago." "Perhaps not," a third voice interjected, Elder Thea. "But our sources suggest they've formed an alliance with the Shadow Valley pack." Aria's hand stilled. The Shadow Valley wolves were notorious for their stealth and ruthlessness. "What we lack," Lucas continued, "is information about their timeline and strategy. Our scouts can't get close enough without detection. We need someone on the inside," Mikkal stated. "Someone who can move between packs without raising suspicion." "Impossible," Elder Thea replied. "They'd smell a silver moonwolf immediately." The conversation shifted to tactical matters, voices lowering further. Aria resumed her work, mind racing. The Red Claw pack had taken everything from her once before. The thought of them threatening her pack, regardless of how some members treated her, stirred something protective within her. Lost in thought, she didn't notice the council chamber door opening until a shadow fell across the wet floor. "What are you doing here?" Mikkal demanded, his imposing figure filling the doorway. Aria scrambled to her feet, wincing as the bond between them pulsed at his proximity. "Cleaning, Alpha, as scheduled." His eyes narrowed, gaze sweeping from her face to the bucket beside her. "How long have you been out here?" "Not long," she answered, keeping her eyes lowered. "I can come back later if..." "How much did you hear?" His voice had dropped to a dangerous rumble. Aria hesitated. Lying to an Alpha was foolish, but admitting to overhearing pack security matters might be worse. Before she could decide, Beta Lucas and Elder Thea emerged from the chamber. Lucas's expression darkened upon seeing her. "Was she eavesdropping?" he asked sharply. "I was just doing my work," Aria protested, gesturing to the half-cleaned floor. Mikkal studied her, his gaze intense enough to make her wolf stir restlessly. "What did you hear, Omega? Answer truthfully." Something in his tone compelled her response. "The Red Claw pack is planning something with the Shadow Valley wolves. You need information, but can't get close enough." Lucas cursed under his breath. "This is sensitive pack business." "She shouldn't..." "Wait," Mikkal interrupted, his expression shifting from anger to something more calculating. "You recognize the packs I mentioned?" Aria nodded. "The Red Claws killed my parents during the territory dispute. I was 5. A moment of silence followed this revelation. Elder Thea's eyes softened slightly, while Lucas looked uncomfortable. "And the Shadow Valley pack?" Mikkal pressed. "Everyone knows their reputation," Aria replied. "They specialize in stealth attacks, often hired by other packs for their ability to infiltrate territories undetected. Mikkal exchanged a glance with Lucas, something unspoken passing between them. Then, unexpectedly, he addressed Elder Thea. "Leave us. I wish to speak with the Omega alone." The elder nodded, touching Lucas's arm to guide him away, despite his obvious reluctance. When they had disappeared down the corridor, Mikkal turned back to Aria. "Come with me," he ordered, already striding toward his office. Aria followed, her heart racing. The Alpha's office was his personal domain, a place few pack members ever entered. The room was austere but impressive. Dark wood furnishings, maps covering one wall, weapons displayed on another. Large windows overlooked the territory, a constant reminder of what he protected. Mikkal closed the door behind them, then circled to stand behind his desk. The physical barrier between them seemed deliberate, as if he needed distance. "You said the Red Claws killed your parents," he began without preamble. "Yet you show no outward hatred when mentioning them." "Hatred doesn't bring back the dead," Aria replied quietly. "And Omegas aren't encouraged to express strong emotions." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps. "You're observant," he noted. "And clearly you listen well. When you're invisible, you hear many things," she said simply. Mikkal's eyes narrowed at her choice of words. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, abruptly, he asked, "How many pack members speak to you directly each day?" The question caught her off guard. "Before your return? Perhaps 3 or 4. Martha, the housekeeper. Occasionally, someone giving cleaning instructions. And how many notice when you enter a room?" Understanding dawned. "Very few, unless I'm in their way." Mikkal nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "You move through this pack house unnoticed. You clean council chambers, private quarters, common areas. You hear conversations not meant for your ears, yet no one thinks to guard their words around you." Aria remained silent, uncertain where this was leading. Mikkal leaned forward, placing his palms flat on the desk. "We have a problem. You and I. This connection between us complicates matters, for both of us." The direct acknowledgement of their bond sent a jolt through her. It was the first time he'd referenced it since his public rejection. "You want to leave the pack?" he continued. "I need information that my warriors cannot obtain. Perhaps we can help each other." Aria's breath caught. "What are you suggesting?" "The Red Claw and Shadow Valley packs are planning something that threatens everything I've built. I need to know what, when, and how." His blue eyes locked with hers. "You possess a unique ability to go unnoticed, to hear what others don't intend to reveal. You want me to spy for you," she stated, realization dawning. "I want you to use your natural gifts to protect your pack," he countered. "In exchange, once the threat is neutralized, I will grant you what you desire, freedom to leave the Silver Moon Pack." The offer hung between them, unexpected and fraught with implications. Aria's mind raced. This was both opportunity and danger, a chance for eventual freedom, but at considerable risk. "How would this work?" she asked cautiously. "I can't exactly walk into enemy territory." "No," Mikkal agreed. "But there are neutral gathering places, the monthly market in the border town, the Moonlight Festival in 2 weeks, places where wolves from different packs mingle. Places where servants and low-ranking wolves are ignored, just as they are here." Aria considered this. "And if I'm caught?" "You won't be," he stated with alpha confidence. "But if something goes wrong, I would extract you, Whatever our personal situation, you would be acting under my orders, as a member of my pack. The assurance surprised her. She studied his face, searching for deception, but finding only intensity and something else, a reluctant respect, perhaps. If I do this, she said slowly, and if I succeed, you'll let me go? Your word as Alpha? Mikkal straightened, his expression solemn. My word as Alpha. Help me protect this pack, and I will release you from it. The irony wasn't lost on her. To earn her freedom from a mate bond she never asked for, she would have to work closely with the very wolf she needed distance from. Yet what choice did she have? Remaining as she was, caught in limbo, was slowly destroying her. I accept, she said finally. Something that might have been relief crossed Mikkal's features. We begin tomorrow. You'll need training. Training? What to listen for? How to extract information without raising suspicion? How to defend yourself if necessary? He moved toward the door, signaling the end of their meeting. Be at the training grounds at dawn. Tell no one of our arrangement. As Aria turned to leave, Mikkal added, one more thing. His voice had softened almost imperceptibly. The bond between us, it causes you pain? The unexpected question caught her off guard. Yes, she admitted. Especially since your rejection? He nodded once, his jaw tightening. For me as well, working together may intensify that discomfort. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the Alpha facade slipped, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath, conflicted, struggling against the same forces that tormented her. I understand the risk, Aria said quietly. It's worth it for a chance at freedom. As she left his office, Aria felt lighter than she had in days. The pain of the bond remained, but now it was accompanied by something new, purpose, and the first fragile seedling of hope. Chapter 7. A Dangerous Alliance. Dawn painted the training grounds in shades of gold and amber as Aria approached. The area was deserted at this early hour, precisely as Mikkal had planned. She wore simple clothes Martha had helped her find. Dark pants, a fitted shirt, and soft-soled boots that allowed for quiet movement. Mikkal was already there, his powerful frame outlined against the rising sun as he arranged various items on a wooden table. He wore training clothes rather than his formal Alpha attire, the simple garments doing nothing to diminish his commanding presence. He looked up at her approach, his expression unreadable. You're punctual. Good, Aria nodded, stopping at a careful distance. Even with several feet between them, the bond hummed like a plucked string, resonating through her body. We have limited time, Mikkal stated. All business. The Moonlight Festival is 10 days away. By then, you need to be prepared. What exactly will I be doing? Aria asked. Listening, observing, gathering information without being noticed. He gestured to the items on the table. These are maps of the festival grounds and surrounding territories. Memorize them. If you need to leave quickly, you must know every exit, every hiding place. For the next hour, he drilled her on the geography, pointing out potential danger zones and safe meeting points. His teaching style was direct and demanding, but not unkind. When she demonstrated quick memorization of the complex layouts, a flicker of approval crossed his features. Now, he said, moving to the center of the training area, we address your physical capabilities. Aria tensed. I'm not a fighter. No, he agreed. And we're not trying to make you one. But you need basic defensive skills. He motioned her closer. Show me how you would break away if someone grabbed you. Hesitantly, Aria approached. Mikkal reached out, his hand closing around her wrist. The moment his skin touched hers, a jolt of electricity shot up her arm. Their eyes met in shared shock at the intensity of the contact. Mikkal recovered first, his jaw tightening. "Focus," he commanded, though his voice had roughened. "How do you escape?" Aria tried to pull away, but his grip was firm. "I can't. You're too strong." "Strength isn't everything," he replied. "Try again. Use leverage, not power." For the next hour, he taught her simple but effective defensive moves, how to break holds, create distance, and use an attacker's momentum against them. Each demonstration required contact, each touch sending waves of sensation through the bond. By mid-morning, they were both breathing harder than the physical exertion warranted, the air between them charged with unacknowledged tension. "Enough," Mikkal finally declared, stepping back. "We'll continue tomorrow. For now, I have another assignment." He led her to his office, where maps and documents covered his desk. "These are reports from our border patrols and intelligence from the last 3 months. I want you to review them." Aria looked at him in confusion. "I don't understand. I'm not trained to analyze military reports." "No," he agreed. "But you have fresh eyes. Sometimes those who are trained miss things because they have preconceptions about what they're seeing." He gestured to a chair. "Sit. Read. Tell me what stands out to you." For hours, Aria immersed herself in the documents. Reports of border incursions, trading disputes, alliance negotiations. A complex web of pack politics she'd never been privy to before. Mikkal worked at his desk, occasionally answering her questions, but mostly letting her form her own impressions. As afternoon faded into evening, Aria sat back, rubbing her tired eyes. "There's something strange about these trading disputes with the Mountain Ridge Pack." Mikkal looked up, interest sharpening his gaze. "Explain." "They filed 3 formal complaints about our merchants undercutting prices, but according to these inventory reports, we haven't sent traders to their territory in months." She tapped a document. "It feels like they're manufacturing grievances." Mikkal came around the desk, leaning over to examine the papers she'd indicated. His proximity sent her pulse racing, the bond between them pulling like a physical force. "You're right," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I missed that connection." He straightened, studying her with new consideration. "What else?" "The timing of the Red Claw border incursions," she continued, pushing past her awareness of him. "They always occur when the Shadow Valley Scouts are reported on our eastern border. It's as if they're coordinating to divide our attention." A slow smile spread across Mikkal's face, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. The transformation was startling, softening his harsh features and lighting his eyes. "You have good instincts," he acknowledged. "Better than some of my council members." The unexpected praise warmed her. "I just noticed patterns." "Pattern recognition is a valuable skill." He gathered the documents, organizing them into neat stacks. "Tomorrow we'll continue your training. For now, get some rest." Days passed in a similar rhythm. Mornings spent in physical training, afternoons analyzing intelligence reports. With each session, Aria grew more confident in her abilities, and Mikkal's instruction became less formal, occasionally verging on something almost like camaraderie. The bond between them remained a constant presence, intensifying with their prolonged proximity. Neither mentioned it directly, but Aria noticed how Mikkal would sometimes pause mid-sentence when their hands accidentally brushed. or how his eyes would linger on her face when he thought she wasn't looking. On the 7th day, as they reviewed new intelligence, Aria made a discovery that changed everything. "Alpha," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "Look at this." She spread 4 separate reports across the desk. The Red Claw Pack's movements, the Shadow Valley Scouts, the Mountain Ridge trading disputes, and these strange meetings reported in neutral territory. Mikkal frowned, studying the documents. "What am I looking for?" "The names," Aria said, pointing to each report. "Different packs, different grievances, but the same 3 wolves appear in all these reports. They're connecting points." Mikkal's expression darkened as he followed her logic. "You're suggesting coordination between all 3 packs." "More than coordination," Aria replied, her heart racing with the implications. "I think it's a coalition, against you specifically." She indicated another document. "This report mentions overheard conversation about removing the obstacle to progress." And here, she pointed to another passage, reference to the scarred one who must fall. Mikkal touched the scar that ran from temple to jaw, his expression grim. "An assassination plot." "Not just that," Aria continued, connecting more documents. "These supply movements suggest something larger. They're planning to eliminate you and then immediately move against the pack while it's in disarray." Mikkal paced the length of the office, energy radiating from him in waves. "If you're right, the Moonlight Festival is their perfect opportunity. Neutral ground, multiple packs present, confusion and celebration to cover their movements." "And you're expected to attend," Aria added quietly. He stopped pacing, turning to face her. "This changes our plan. I can't send you into what may be a coordinated trap." "But you need confirmation," she argued. "Suspicions aren't enough to accuse 3 packs of conspiracy. Your safety isn't more important than the packs," she interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. "This is what you trained me for." Their eyes locked in silent battle of wills. Finally, Mikkal nodded, reluctant respect evident in his expression. "We'll adjust the plan. More precautions, and I'll be closer than originally intended." The night before the Moonlight Festival arrived too quickly. Final preparations took place in a small clearing in the forest, away from curious eyes. Beta Lucas, the only other pack member aware of their arrangement, reviewed the communication signals one last time. "If you discover concrete evidence of the plot, use this," he said, handing Aria a small carved wooden token. "Drop it at the north entrance. Our scout will be watching." Aria nodded, tucking the token into her pocket. She wore simple servant's clothing, the kind that would blend in among the workers at the festival. "Remember," Mikkal instructed, "observe only. Do not engage. At the first sign of danger, withdraw to the meeting point." "I understand," she assured him. As Lucas moved away to check the perimeter, Mikkal stepped closer. In the moonlight, his features seemed less harsh, his eyes reflecting the silver glow. "You've exceeded my expectations," he said quietly. "Whatever happens tomorrow, know that." The unexpected praise caught her off guard. "Thank you, Alpha." "Mikkal," he corrected, his voice dropping lower. "When we're alone, you can use my name." The intimacy of the permission sent warmth spreading through her chest. Before she could respond, a crashing sound came from the underbrush to their right. Mikkal tensed, pushing Aria behind him in one fluid motion. A massive wolf burst from the trees, not pack. its scent unfamiliar and threatening. It lunged directly toward them, teeth bared in attack. Everything happened in seconds. Mikkal shoved Aria aside, partially shifting as he met the attacker head-on. The wolves collided in a fury of snarls and snapping teeth. Aria scrambled backward, watching in horror as they fought. Mikkal's silver-grey fur stark against the attacker's dark brown. The enemy wolf broke free, changing direction to charge at Aria. She froze, training momentarily forgotten in the face of primal fear. Before the wolf could reach her, Mikkal intercepted, his partially shifted form taking the full impact of the attack. They rolled across the clearing, a blur of fur and flesh. A pained yelp cut through the night as the enemy wolf's teeth sank into Mikkal's shoulder. Blood darkened his shirt, but he fought with renewed fury, finally pinning the attacker with a powerful blow. The enemy wolf went limp. Mikkal stood, breathing heavily, blood streaming from his wound as he shifted fully back to human form. "Lucas," he called, voice ragged. "Perimeter breach." Beta Lucas appeared instantly, taking in the scene with a warrior's assessment. "Scout," he concluded, examining the unconscious wolf. "Shadow Valley by the scent. They know we're onto them." Mikkal turned to Aria, his eyes wild with a mixture of battle rage and concern. "Are you hurt?" "No," she managed, still shaking. "But you are." "It's nothing," he dismissed, though the wound clearly pained him. "It's not nothing," she insisted, moving toward him. "Let me see." Perhaps it was the adrenaline of the moment, or the shock of the attack, but neither of them seemed to remember their careful avoidance of contact. Aria reached up, gently pulling aside the torn fabric of his shirt to examine the bite. The moment her fingers touched his skin, the world seemed to stop. The bond between them flared like wildfire, no longer a dull ache, but an overwhelming force. Gasping, Aria tried to pull away, but Mikkal's hand caught hers, holding it in place against his chest. Their eyes met, and something fundamental shifted. The connection between them pulsed with shared emotion. Fear, relief, and something deeper neither was ready to name. "I felt it," Mikkal whispered, his voice rough. "When he charged at you, I felt your fear, as if it were my own." Aria nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. His heartbeat thundered beneath her palm, strong and steady. "Alpha," Lucas called, breaking the moment. "We need to move. If one scout found us, others may follow." Mikkal released her hand reluctantly, the loss of contact leaving them both visibly shaken. "Tomorrow's plan is compromised," he stated, his alpha authority reasserting itself. "We need a new strategy." As they hurried back toward pack territory, Aria caught Mikkal watching her, his expression troubled, yet somehow softer than before. The bond between them had changed tonight, strengthened by danger and that moment of unguarded connection. Whatever happened at tomorrow's festival, nothing between them would ever be quite the same again. Chapter 8. The Bond Won't Break. Morning light filtered through the trees as Aria and Mikkal walked the perimeter of the festival grounds. They had arrived hours before the official opening, using the pre-dawn darkness to scout the area unnoticed. After last night's attack, the original plan had been scrapped in favor of a more direct approach. They would work together, Aria still posing as a servant while Mikkal maintained his alpha presence nearby. "The main pavilion will be the most dangerous," Mikkal explained, pointing to the large structure being erected in the center of the grounds. "All pack leaders are expected to meet there at moonrise." Aria nodded, committing the layout to memory. "And you believe that's when they'll make their move?" "It would be the logical time," Maximum symbolic impact. Multiple witnesses. His jaw tightened. A public assassination to demonstrate their combined power. They continued their circuit, discussing potential threats and escape routes. Aria noticed a subtle shift in Mikkal's demeanor since the previous night's attack. The rigid formality he'd maintained during their training sessions had softened. He spoke to her more as a partner than a subordinate, occasionally asking for her opinion rather than simply issuing instructions. More telling were the small physical changes. He walked closer to her than strictly necessary. When pointing out features of the grounds, his hands sometimes brushed against hers, the brief contact sending ripples through their bond. Each time he would tense momentarily, but no longer jerked away as he once had. By mid-morning, festival workers began arriving in earnest. Aria donned her servant's apron, blending seamlessly among those setting up food stalls and decorations. Mikkal reluctantly departed to meet with the festival organizers, his role as Alpha requiring his official presence. "Be careful," he said before leaving, his voice low and intense. "Our enemy has already proven they're watching. Trust no one." "I will," she promised. "You too." His eyes lingered on her face a moment longer than necessary, before he turned away, the bond between them stretching, but not breaking as distance grew between them. Throughout the day, Aria moved through the festival preparations, ears attuned to conversations around her. She arranged flowers, carried trays, and wiped down tables, all while gathering fragments of information. Most chatter was innocuous, but occasionally she caught whispers that confirmed their suspicions. 3 Alphas meeting before the ceremony. Said the Silver Moon Alpha won't survive the night. New leadership already decided. As afternoon faded into evening, the festival officially began. Wolves from various packs arrived in waves, the atmosphere growing increasingly festive with music, food, and flowing wine. Aria continued her servant role, now carrying drinks among the revelers. Invisible as always, yet seeing everything. From across the crowded main area, she occasionally glimpsed Mikkal performing his alpha duties, greeting other pack leaders, participating in traditional ceremonies, maintaining the appearance of normalcy despite the threat they knew loomed. Several times she caught him scanning the crowd, his eyes finding her with unerring accuracy despite her deliberate attempts to blend in. Each time their gazes connected, even across the distance, the bond pulsed stronger. It no longer brought pain, but rather a strange comfort, an awareness of each other that transcended the physical space between them. As twilight approached, Aria was assigned to serve drinks in a small pavilion reserved for high-ranking wolves. She entered carrying a tray of wine glasses, head appropriately bowed as befitted her supposed station. "Absolutely certain the alliance will be announced tonight," a female voice was saying as Aria approached. "My father has already drafted the formal agreement." Aria recognized that voice. Looking up carefully, she confirmed her suspicion. Cassandra stood among a group of alpha females, resplendent in an emerald dress that emphasized her status and beauty. She hadn't noticed Aria yet, too engrossed in her conversation. "And Mikkal has agreed?" another female asked, skepticism evident in her tone. "Not explicitly," Cassandra admitted, "but he will. The political advantages are too significant to ignore." She smiled, confidence radiating from her. "Besides, after tonight's events, he'll need strong alliances more than ever." Aria's hand trembled slightly as she offered drinks to the group. When she reached Cassandra, the alpha female finally glanced at her, recognition dawning slowly. "Well," Cassandra drawled, taking a glass from the tray. "If it isn't the little Omega who thought she could be an alpha's mate." The other females tittered, examining Aria with newfound interest. "How appropriate to find you serving drinks," Cassandra continued, her smile sharp. "It seems you've finally accepted your proper place." Aria kept her expression neutral, years of practice hiding her emotions serving her well. "Enjoy your evening, ma'am," she murmured, moving to serve the next guest. Cassandra caught her arm, manicured nails digging into Aria's skin. "When Mikkal and I announce our union tonight, perhaps I'll keep you on as personal staff, a daily reminder of your presumption." Something hot and unfamiliar flared in Aria's chest. Not fear or submission, but a fierce, protective anger that startled her with its intensity. Her wolf stirred, rising closer to the surface than ever before. Before she could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "I believe your services are required elsewhere," Beta Lucas stated, appearing beside them. His tone was neutral, but his eyes conveyed a warning to Aria. Cassandra released her grip reluctantly. "Of course. Run along, little Omega." Aria nodded gratefully to Lucas, retreating from the pavilion with her emotions in turmoil. The jealousy that had flared at Cassandra's words confused her. She had no claim on Mikkal. Their arrangement was temporary, their bond unwanted by both of them. Yet the thought of him with Cassandra sent waves of distress through her entire being. Finding a quiet corner behind one of the food stalls, Aria took a moment to compose herself. She closed her eyes, focusing on steadying her breathing, and suddenly became aware of Mikkal's presence, before she heard or saw him. "What happened?" he asked, his voice tight with concern as he stepped into the shadowed area. "I felt your distress." Aria's eyes widened. "You felt it? How?" "The bond," he admitted, running a hand through his hair in a rare gesture of frustration. "It's strengthening. I can sense your stronger emotions now, especially when you're upset." This new development should have alarmed her, but instead Aria felt a strange sense of wonder. "I didn't know that was possible." "Neither did I," Mikkal confessed. He studied her face. "Was it Cassandra? Lucas told me she confronted you." "It's nothing," Aria dismissed. "Just petty intimidation." Mikkal's expression darkened. "She has no right to threaten you." "She believes she does. She thinks you'll announce your union tonight." Something complicated crossed Mikkal's features. "There will be no announcement," he stated firmly. "Regardless of what happens with our situation, I won't mate with her." The relief that flooded through Aria was embarrassingly strong, and from Mikkal's sudden intake of breath, she knew he'd felt it through their bond. Their eyes met, the connection between them almost tangible in the small space. "This isn't what I wanted," Mikkal said softly, his usual harshness absent. "Fighting this bond has been exhausting." "For me too," Aria admitted. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then, surprising her completely, Mikkal asked, "Why did you never try to leave? Before I returned? You could have slipped away, started a new life somewhere." The unexpected question made Aria consider her answer carefully. "I had nowhere to go," she finally replied. "No family, no resources. And Martha," she smiled faintly. "She's the closest thing to a mother I've known. I couldn't leave her." Mikkal nodded, understanding in his eyes. My mother died when I was 12, he offered unexpectedly. My father was Alpha before me, a hard man, but fair. He taught me that pact comes before personal desires, always. Is that why you fought our bonds so hard? Aria asked, emboldened by his rare openness. For the pack? Yes, he acknowledged. At first, his gaze intensified. Now, I'm not so certain what I'm fighting against, or why. The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Before Aria could respond, shouting erupted from the main festival area. The moment shattered as Mikkal's attention snapped toward the disturbance. Stay hidden, he ordered, Alpha authority returning to his voice. Whatever happens next, remember the plan. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving Aria with the lingering warmth of their conversation and a new determination. Whatever threat approached, she would not let it harm him or their pack. As night fell fully, the Moonlight Festival reached its peak. Bonfires blazed around the perimeter, casting dancing shadows across the grounds. The central pavilion glowed with lantern light as pack leaders gathered for the traditional midnight council. Aria moved through the celebration with heightened awareness, her senses seemingly sharper than before. The bond with Mikkal remained a constant presence, a thread she could almost follow through the crowd to where he sat among the other alphas. As she passed behind a group of beta males from various packs, a conversation caught her attention. Signal will come from inside the Silver Moon pack itself. Traitor has confirmed the Alpha will be vulnerable during the moon ceremony. Aria slowed, pretending to collect empty glasses from a nearby table while straining to hear more. Which one is the traitor? One wolf asked. Don't know his name. High-ranking, though. Has the Alpha's ear. A chill ran down Aria's spine. Someone in their inner circle, someone Mikkal trusted, was working with their enemies. She needed to warn him immediately. Moving purposefully towards the central pavilion, Aria kept her head down, still playing the role of servant. As she approached the entrance, she spotted Beta Lucas speaking with two guards. Relief flooded through her. Lucas would know how to get a message to Mikkal. She started toward him, then froze. Something felt wrong. A sensation she'd never experienced before washed over her. A discordant note in the harmony of her awareness centered directly on Lucas. As she watched him speak, the feeling intensified. A certainty forming in her mind with crystal clarity. Deception, betrayal, danger. The realization hit her with physical force. Lucas was a traitor. The bond was somehow allowing her to sense his duplicity, to feel the falsehood radiating from him like a dark aura. Aria backed away slowly, mind racing. If Lucas was working with their enemies, she couldn't risk approaching him. But she needed to warn Mikkal before the trap was sprung. Circling around to the rear of the pavilion, she searched desperately for another way to reach him. The back entrance was guarded by wolves she didn't recognize, likely from allied packs, but she couldn't risk trusting anyone now. A hand closed around her arm, yanking her into the shadows between two tents. Aria started to struggle, then recognized Mikkal's scent, an instant before seeing his face. "What are you doing?" he demanded in a harsh whisper. "You're supposed to stay away from the pavilion." "Lucas?" she gasped. "It's Lucas. He's the traitor." Mikkal's expression hardened. "That's impossible. He's been my beta for years, my father's before that." "I know it sounds crazy, but I can feel it," Aria insisted. "Through our bond. When I look at him, I sense deception, danger." She gripped Mikkal's arm. Please, you have to believe me. Doubt warred with trust in his eyes. You're certain? Absolutely. I heard wolves talking about a traitor in your inner circle. And when I saw Lucas, I just knew. She struggled to explain the inexplicable certainty. It's like the bond is letting me see what others can't. Mikkal was silent for a long moment, weighing her words against years of loyalty. Finally, he nodded. If you're right, the entire midnight ceremony is a trap. I'm supposed to stand in the center of the circle, directly beneath the full moon. The perfect target, Aria whispered. I need to confirm this before making accusations, Mikkal said, his mind clearly racing through options. If Lucas is truly betraying us, we need to know who else is involved and what exactly they're planning. How? A grim smile touched Mikkal's lips by springing their trap on our terms. He looked at her intently. I need your help one more time. As he outlined his plan, Aria felt a new emotion flowing through their bond. Trust. Complete, unquestioning trust in her abilities and judgment. The realization warmed her more deeply than she could have imagined. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The bond between them no longer a burden but a strength neither had anticipated. Chapter 9. The betrayal shadows stretched long across the festival grounds as Aria followed Beta Lucas through the crowd. Mikkal's plan was simple but dangerous. She would track Lucas, discover who he was meeting with, and gather evidence of the conspiracy while Mikkal prepared a countermove. Be careful, he had warned before they parted. If he senses you following him, withdraw immediately. The bond between them stretched like an invisible tether as she maintained her distance from Lucas. He moved with purpose, occasionally nodding to festival goers, but never stopping to engage. His path took him away from the main celebration, toward the darker periphery where the forest began. Aria kept to the shadows, her movements silent as she trailed him. The skills Mikkal had taught her over the past days served her well. How to match her footfalls to ambient noise. How to use crowds as cover. How to remain in peripheral vision where she was least likely to be noticed. Lucas paused at the edge of the tree line, glancing back toward the festival. Aria froze behind a vendor's cart, hardly daring to breathe. After a moment, apparently satisfied he wasn't being followed, Lucas slipped into the forest. Aria counted to 20 before moving forward. The darkness beneath the trees was nearly complete, broken only by occasional shafts of moonlight penetrating the canopy. She relied more on her wolf senses now, following Lucas's scent trail through the underbrush. The path wound deeper into the woods until she detected voices ahead. Dropping to a crouch, Aria crept forward until she could make out a small clearing where several figures had gathered. Lucas stood facing 3 wolves Aria recognized with a chill. The alpha of the Red Claw pack, his second in command, and Cassandra's father, Alpha Thorn of the Northern pack. A 4th figure emerged from the shadows opposite her position, the leader of the Shadow Valley pack, recognizable by the distinctive silver streak in his dark hair. Is everything in place? The Red Claw Alpha demanded. Lucas nodded. Mikkal suspects nothing. He'll stand at the center of the moon circle at midnight, as tradition dictates. And the guards? Alpha Thorn asked. Positioned exactly as we discussed. Those loyal to me will create a perimeter that your assassins can penetrate. Lucas's voice held no emotion, as if discussing weather rather than betrayal. Once Mikkal falls, the Shadow Valley Alpha added, the Silver Moon pack will be vulnerable. My warriors are positioned to move immediately. Remember our agreement? Alpha Thorn interjected. No unnecessary casualties. We want to absorb the pack, not decimate it. Cassandra's father. Aria's stomach twisted with the realization that the woman who sought to be Mikkal's mate was part of the conspiracy to kill him. And my reward? Lucas asked, his tone finally betraying eagerness. As agreed, the Red Claw Alpha confirmed. You will be installed as Alpha of what remains of the Silver Moon territory. Your loyalty has earned you that much. Aria had heard enough. She needed to get back to Mikkal immediately with confirmation of the plot and all the conspirators involved. Carefully, she began to retreat, moving backwards through the underbrush. A twig snapped beneath her foot. The conversation in the clearing ceased instantly. What was that? The Shadow Valley Alpha hissed. Probably an animal, Lucas began, but the Red Claw Alpha was already signaling to his guards. Check the perimeter, now. Heart pounding, Aria abandoned stealth for speed, turning to flee through the forest. Behind her, she heard shouts and the sounds of pursuit. She ran faster than she ever had before, her wolf lending her strength and agility as she dodged between trees. The festival lights appeared ahead, tantalizingly close. If she could just reach the crowd, she might lose her pursuers. 20 more yards. 10. A heavy weight slammed into her from behind, driving her to the ground. Aria gasped as the air was knocked from her lungs, twisting desperately to face her attacker. A Red Claw enforcer pinned her down, recognition dawning in his eyes. It's the Omega, he called over his shoulder. The one from Mikkal's pack. More wolves surrounded her, hauling her roughly to her feet. Despite her training, she was outnumbered and overpowered. They dragged her back toward the clearing, her struggles futile against their combined strength. The 4 Alphas and Lucas looked up as she was thrust into the center of their meeting. Lucas's face paled with shock. What is she doing here? He demanded. She's just a servant, an Omega. The Red Claw Alpha approached Aria, gripping her chin to force her face up. Is she? Then why would an Omega be spying on a private meeting? His nostrils flared as he scented her. She carries Mikkal's scent on her. Lucas frowned, stepping closer to verify this claim. His eyes widened. Impossible. She's nothing to him. He rejected their mate bond publicly. Mate bond? Alpha Thorn's attention sharpened. This is the Omega Cassandra mentioned? The one who presumed to be Mikkal's mate? Aria maintained her silence, mind racing. If they knew her connection to Mikkal, they would realize her value as a hostage. If they didn't, they might simply kill her as an inconvenient witness. The Shadow Valley Alpha circled her slowly, his calculating gaze assessing her from all angles. Interesting, he murmured. Perhaps our plan requires adjustment. What do you mean? Lucas asked. If she truly is his mate, bonded or not, we have something far more valuable than we realized. A cold smile spread across his face. Mikkal might resist many things, but the call of a mate in danger, that's primal, instinctive, impossible to ignore. Fear coursed through Aria, not for herself, but for Mikkal. They intended to use her as bait. He rejected the bond, she blurted, desperate to protect him. He doesn't care what happens to me. The Red Claw Alpha laughed. Then why do you carry his scent so strongly? Why were you spying for him? He turned to the others. The bond may be rejected, but it still exists. It will be enough. Take her to the old temple ruins, the Shadow Valley Alpha ordered. Send word to Mikkal that we have his mate. Tell him to come alone if he wants her to live. And if he refuses? Lucas asked. Then we proceed with the original plan, Alpha Thorn stated. But this way offers a cleaner solution, less chance of collateral damage or witnesses. As the guards bound her wrists, Aria closed her eyes, concentrating on the bond between her and Mikkal. She had no way to send him a message, but perhaps he would sense her fear, her warning. It was a desperate hope, but the only one she had. Don't come, she thought fiercely, willing the message through their connection. It's a trap. Stay away. The ancient temple ruins stood a mile from the festival grounds, stone columns rising like skeletal fingers against the night sky. Aria sat bound to one of these columns, her captors arranged in strategic positions around the perimeter. They had sent their message to Mikkal nearly an hour ago, and tension grew with each passing minute. He's not coming, Lucas said, pacing nervously. He's too smart to walk into an obvious trap. He'll come, the Shadow Valley Alpha replied confidently. The mate bond gives him no choice. Aria prayed they were wrong. She had felt Mikkal's alarm through their bond when her fear had spiked during the capture. The connection between them had flared like a beacon, carrying her emotions to him with startling clarity. But she had also tried desperately to project her warning, to somehow communicate the danger awaiting him. A commotion at the perimeter drew everyone's attention. One of the guards came running into the central area of the ruins. He's here, the guard reported. Alone, as demanded. Aria's heart sank. Despite her warnings, despite knowing it was a trap, Mikkal had come for her. The Alphas moved into position, hidden among the ruins, with clear lines of sight to the central area where she was displayed as bait. Remember, the Red Claw Alpha instructed his assassins. Wait until he's fully in the open, focused on the girl. Then take him down simultaneously. Minutes later, a figure appeared at the entrance to the ruins. Mikkal stood tall and proud, his posture betraying no fear, despite walking willingly into an ambush. His eyes found Aria immediately, the bond between them surging with shared emotion. His relief at seeing her alive, her despair at his arrival. "Let her go," he called out, his voice echoing among the stone structures. "Your quarrel is with me, not her." "Come forward, Alpha Mikkal," the Shadow Valley leader responded, still hidden from view. "Prove you're alone and unarmed, and we'll discuss terms." Mikkal advanced slowly into the open space, his gaze never leaving Aria's. Through their bond, she felt something unexpected. Not fear or resignation, but a fierce determination. And anticipation. "Trust me," his emotions seemed to say. "Be ready." Understanding dawned. He had a plan. Somehow, he had known what she was trying to tell him through their bond. He was walking into the trap deliberately, but on his own terms. As Mikkal reached the center of the ruins, the 4 Alphas emerged from their hiding places, surrounding him. Lucas stepped forward, his betrayal now fully revealed. "I'm sorry it came to this," Lucas said, though his tone held no remorse. "You were too traditional, too unwilling to compromise. The pack needs new leadership." "Betraying your Alpha, your pack," Mikkal replied evenly. "There's no coming back from that, Lucas." "I don't intend to come back," Lucas sneered. "I intend to move forward, as the new Alpha." The Red Claw leader signaled to his hidden assassins. "Enough talk. Finish it." In the split second before the attack began, Mikkal's eyes met Aria's once more. A surge of power flowed through their bond. Strength, courage, and something that felt remarkably like love. Chaos erupted. As the assassins emerged from hiding, howls sounded from the forest surrounding the ruins. Silver Moon warriors poured into the area, led by Elder Thea and a contingent of loyal pack members. Mikkal had not come alone after all. The conspirators, caught by surprise, scrambled to regroup. In the confusion, Aria saw her opportunity. The training Mikkal had given her hadn't been just for show. He had taught her how to escape restraints. Working frantically at the ropes binding her wrists, she felt them begin to loosen. Across the ruins, Mikkal fought with lethal precision, his partially shifted form a blur of motion as he engaged the Red Claw Alpha directly. Lucas, seeing his plans unraveling, turned and fled toward the forest, only to be intercepted by Elder Thea herself, her ancient power surprising everyone as she blocked his escape. With a final twist, Aria freed herself from the ropes. She had no time to feel relief as she spotted the Shadow Valley Alpha circling behind Mikkal, claws extended for a killing blow, while Mikkal was occupied with his current opponent. Without conscious thought, Aria moved. Her wolf surged forward, lending her speed and strength as she raced across the ruins. She launched herself at the Shadow Valley Alpha, catching him mid-lunge. They tumbled to the ground, his surprise at being attacked by an Omega giving Aria a momentary advantage. "You dare?" he snarled, recovering quickly and pinning her beneath his superior strength. "Yes," Aria growled back, her voice carrying a dual tone as her wolf rose closer to the surface than ever before. "I dare." Something extraordinary happened then, as the Alpha's claws descended toward her throat. Aria felt Mikkal's presence through their bond, not physically, but energetically. Strength poured into her, his power somehow flowing through their connection to augment her own. With a surge of combined might, Aria twisted free of the Alpha's grip, her movements faster and more powerful than should have been possible for an Omega. She struck back, her partially shifted form moving with a grace and precision that matched Mikkal's own fighting style. Across the ruins, Mikkal dispatched his opponent and turned, his eyes widening as he witnessed Aria holding her own against an Alpha. Through their bond, she felt his astonishment and fierce pride. The Shadow Valley. Alpha, realizing he faced something unprecedented, attempted to retreat. Aria pressed her advantage, driving him back until he stumbled against a fallen column. Before he could recover, Mikkal was there, the two of them flanking their enemy in perfect coordination. "Impossible!" the Shadow Valley Alpha gasped, looking between them. "An Omega cannot—" "She is not just an Omega," Mikkal stated, his voice resonating with pride. "She is my mate." The public acknowledgement sent a wave of warmth through Aria, strengthening her further. Together, they subdued the Shadow Valley Alpha as the battle around them turned decisively in the Silver Moon Pack's favor. Within minutes, the conspiracy had collapsed. The Red Claw Alpha lay defeated, the Northern Pack leader restrained, and Lucas captured while trying to flee. Only Cassandra's father had escaped in the chaos, but with his allies captured, his part in the plot would soon be exposed. As the Silver Moon warriors secured their prisoners, Mikkal crossed to Aria, his eyes never leaving hers. The bond between them pulsed with shared emotion, relief, triumph, and something deeper neither had been willing to acknowledge until now. "You came for me," Aria said softly, even knowing it was a trap. "Of course I did," Mikkal replied, reaching out to touch her face with unexpected gentleness. "I felt your fear. your warning. But I also knew I couldn't leave you in their hands. How did you know to bring reinforcements? A smile touched his lips. Your warning through our bond was clearer than you realize. I felt not just your fear, but images, glimpses of what you'd seen, enough to understand their plan and prepare a counter-strategy. Aria's eyes widened. The bond let you see through my eyes? Not exactly, but enough to know you were in danger and where to find you. His expression grew serious. When I felt your capture, I realized something I've been fighting against for too long. What? She asked, hardly daring to hope. That you are not my weakness, he said, his voice low and intense. You are my strength. What we did tonight. Fighting as one, sharing power through our bond. It shouldn't be possible. Yet with you it was. Around them, the Silver Moon warriors were watching with undisguised interest, witnessing a transformation in their Alpha as he stood before the Omega he had once rejected. The mate bond, Elder Thea said, approaching them with a knowing smile. It has always been more than tradition or convenience. It is the Moon Goddess's greatest gift. Two wolves made stronger together than they could ever be apart. Mikkal looked from the elder to Aria, his expression softening in a way few had ever witnessed. I was a fool to fight against fate, he admitted. A fool to reject what was always meant to be. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting golden light across the ancient ruins, Aria stood beside her Alpha. No longer the invisible Omega, but a wolf who had found her true strength, and the mate who recognized it. Chapter 10. The Alpha's Choice. The Silver Moon pack house hummed with tension. 3 days had passed since the battle at the temple ruins, and the aftermath had left the pack in disarray. Beta Lucas's betrayal had shaken their foundation, forcing a reorganization of leadership and raising questions about who could be trusted. In the Great Hall, pack members gathered in anxious clusters, voices hushed as they discussed recent events. The conspiracy had been thwarted, the enemy Alphas imprisoned awaiting judgment from the Council of Packs. Yet uncertainty lingered like morning mist, clouding their future. Aria moved quietly through the hall, delivering tea to the elders who sat in conference. Her status remained ambiguous, no longer just an Omega servant, but not officially recognized as anything else. Pack members who had once ignored her now watched with curious eyes, uncertain how to treat the wolf who had fought alongside their Alpha. Since returning from the ruins, Mikkal had been consumed with diplomatic matters. The Northern Pack, whose Alpha had escaped capture, was demanding his daughter Cassandra's return and denying involvement in the conspiracy despite evidence to the contrary. Threats of severed alliances and trade embargoes had followed, creating a political crisis that required the Alpha's full attention. Aria had seen little of him in these days, their contact limited to brief moments in passing, charged with unspoken emotion. The bond between them remained strong, but its future hung in question. What had seemed clear in the heat of battle had become complicated in the cold light of diplomatic reality. As Aria finished serving the elders, the main doors swung open. Mikkal entered, his powerful presence immediately commanding attention. He looked exhausted, dark circles beneath his eyes testifying to sleepless nights spent in negotiation, yet he carried himself with unwavering authority, his gaze sweeping the hall until it found Aria. For a moment their eyes locked, the bond between them pulsing with shared emotion, longing, uncertainty, and something deeper neither had fully named. Then Elder Thea rose, breaking the moment. "Alpha," she called. "The Council requests your presence. The Northern Pack's emissaries have arrived." Mikkal nodded, his expression hardening into the mask of leadership. As he followed the elder toward the council chamber, he passed close to Aria, his hand briefly brushing hers, a fleeting contact that sent warmth cascading through their bond. "Meet me in the garden at sunset," he murmured, too low for others to hear. Aria nodded slightly, hope and apprehension battling within her heart. The pack garden was a peaceful sanctuary, roses and moonflowers blooming along stone pathways. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, Aria waited beside the small fountain at the garden's center. She had changed from her work clothes into a simple blue dress Martha had helped her alter. It wasn't fancy by pack standards, but it was the nicest thing she owned, and somehow it felt important to meet Mikkal as something other than a servant today. His scent reached her before she heard his footsteps, pine, leather, and that distinctive wild note that called to her wolf. Turning, she found him standing at the garden entrance, his formal alpha attire replaced by simpler clothing. In this moment, he looked less like the fearsome leader and more like the man beneath the title. "You came," he said, approaching slowly. "Of course," Aria replied. "How did the meeting go?" Mikkal's expression tightened. "As expected. The Northern Pack denies involvement in the conspiracy despite their alpha's presence at the ruins. They're demanding we release Cassandra as a show of good faith." "And will you?" Aria asked, keeping her voice neutral despite the twist of emotion in her chest. She wasn't directly involved in the assassination plot, Mikkal acknowledged. But she knew of it and said nothing. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Her father has made it clear that our continued alliance depends on how we handle this situation. And on your potential union with her," Aria added softly, naming the unspoken issue hanging between them. Mikkal's eyes met hers, intense and troubled. "Yes." Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of impossible choices. The bond hummed with shared emotion. His conflict, her resignation. "The pack needs those alliances," Aria finally said, her voice steady despite the pain lancing through her heart. "Especially now, with our leadership weakened by betrayal." "Aria?" "I understand, Mikkal," she interrupted gently. "I've always understood. You're the Alpha. Your responsibility is to the pack first." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage for what she needed to say next. "That's why I'm releasing you from any obligation you might feel toward me." Surprise flashed across his face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'll leave," she stated simply. "Not the pack. This is my home too. But I'll go to one of the outer settlements. Far enough that the bond won't cause either of us pain." Her voice nearly broke on the last words, but she forced herself to continue. "You'll be free to make the alliance your pack needs." Mikkal stared at her, his expression shifting from surprise to something darker. "You would do that? Walk away from what we found together? For the good of the pack?" "Yes." Aria met his gaze steadily. "You taught me that pack comes before personal desires. I learned that lesson well." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the garden. In the golden light, Aria saw conflict rage across Mikkal's features, the alpha warring with the man, duty battling desire. "When would you go?" he asked, his voice rough. "Tomorrow," she answered. "Elder Thea has arranged a position for me in the northern settlement. I'll be teaching the younger wolves there." Mikkal stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Is this truly what you want?" The question pierced her carefully maintained composure. What I want, she whispered, has never been the point. Through their bond, she felt his struggle intensify. Pain, longing, and frustration swirling like a storm. His hand rose, hovering near her face, as if he wanted to touch her, but feared what might happen if he did. I need to address the pack tonight, he said finally, his hand dropping back to his side. Will you be there? Aria nodded, not trusting her voice. Good, he said, stepping back. I need to prepare. Sunset, in the Great Hall. As he turned to leave, Aria called after him, Mikkal? He paused, looking back. Whatever you decide, I understand. His eyes held hers for a long moment, filled with emotions too complex to name. Then he was gone, leaving Aria alone with the setting sun and the weight of her sacrifice. The great hall filled to capacity as darkness fell. Every member of the Silver Moon pack had gathered, sensing the importance of this meeting. Aria stood at the back, as she always had, though now pack members nodded respectfully as she passed rather than looking through her. Martha stood beside her, weathered hand clasping Aria's in silent support. Are you sure about this, child? The elderly housekeeper asked quietly. It's for the best, Aria replied, the words feeling hollow despite their truth. The crowd parted as Mikkal entered, flanked by the newly appointed Beta and the pack elders. He wore full Alpha regalia, black leather embossed with the pack symbol, silver clasps gleaming in the torchlight. His face was composed, revealing nothing of their earlier conversation. Behind him came another group, the Northern Pack emissaries, and, at their center, Cassandra. She held herself with regal bearing, her golden hair elaborately styled, her clothing rich and formal. She looked every inch the alpha female, the perfect political mate for a pack leader. Aria's heart constricted at the sight, but she kept her expression neutral. This was what she had expected, what she had prepared herself for. Still, the reality cut deeper than she had anticipated. Mikkal ascended the platform, his powerful presence commanding immediate silence. He surveyed the gathered pack, his gaze briefly finding Aria before addressing them all. Silver Moon Pack, he began, his deep voice carrying effortlessly through the hall. We have weathered a storm few packs could survive. Betrayal from within, conspiracy from without. Yet here we stand, unbroken. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. In the aftermath of these events, we face critical decisions about our future, our alliances, our leadership. His eyes flicked toward the Northern Pack delegation. Politics demands certain sacrifices for the greater good. Cassandra stepped forward slightly, a smile of triumph beginning to form on her lips. Aria felt Martha's hand tighten around hers. For generations, Mikkal continued, Alphas have made such sacrifices. My father taught me that pack comes before personal desires, always. He paused, his expression shifting subtly. But recent events have caused me to question whether what we've always done is always right. Confusion rippled through the hall. This was not the announcement anyone had expected. 3 nights ago, I witnessed something our pack histories claim is impossible. An Omega fighting with the strength and courage of an Alpha. A mate bond that transferred power between wolves, making both stronger. His voice strengthened with conviction. I saw the future of our pack, not in political alliances built on convenience, but in bonds forged by the moon goddess herself. Gasps and whispers erupted as pack members realized where his speech was heading. Cassandra's expression hardened, while the northern emissaries exchanged alarmed glances. "Alpha Mikkal," one of the emissaries interjected, stepping forward. "May I remind you of the discussions we've just concluded? The Northern Pack's alliance is important," Mikkal acknowledged. "But it cannot be built on a foundation of lies and rejected mate bonds." He turned to address the emissaries directly. "Your Alpha participated in a conspiracy to assassinate me. Your pack heir knew of this plot and remained silent. These are not the actions of trustworthy allies." The hall fell silent, tension thick in the air. "Silver Moon Pack has always valued tradition," Mikkal continued, turning back to his people. "But perhaps some traditions deserve to be questioned. The belief that Omegas are lesser, that mate bonds should be ignored for political convenience, that strength comes only from dominance." His eyes found Aria again, and this time he held her gaze. "I rejected my true mate out of pride and tradition. I denied what the moon goddess herself had chosen, and in doing so, I nearly lost everything." Aria stood frozen, hardly daring to breathe as Mikkal descended from the platform. The crowd parted before him as he walked directly toward her, his purpose clear in every step. When he reached her, he took her hands in his, uncaring of the hundreds of eyes watching them. "You offered to leave," he said, his voice pitched for all to hear. "To sacrifice your happiness for the good of the pack. That selflessness, that courage, that is the strength our pack truly needs." Through their bond, Aria felt the last of his resistance fall away, replaced by absolute certainty. Tears pricked at her eyes as she realized what was happening. "I will not ask you to leave," Mikkal stated firmly. "Instead, I ask you to stay, not as a servant, not hidden in the shadows, but as my mate, my equal, my alpha female." Shocked murmurs rippled through the hall. An Omega as alpha female was unprecedented, a complete upending of pack hierarchy. The Northern Alliance, Aria began, conscious of the diplomatic implications, "will be renegotiated from a position of strength, not desperation," Mikkal replied. "Our pack is stronger with you by my side. I know this now, beyond any doubt." From the corner of her eye, Aria saw Cassandra turn and storm from the hall, the northern emissaries hurrying after her. But in this moment, politics seemed distant and unimportant compared to the man standing before her, offering everything she had never dared to dream of. "The choice is yours," Mikkal said softly. "I've made mine." The great hall held its collective breath, hundreds of wolves witnessing a moment that will be recorded in pack histories for generations to come. Aria looked into Mikkal's eyes, feeling the truth of his words through their bond, his certainty, his respect, and yes, his love. "Yes," she whispered, then louder for all to hear. "Yes." Mikkal's smile transformed his face, softening the harsh lines of authority into something warmer, more human. Before the entire pack, he pulled her into his arms, sealing their bond with a kiss that sent waves of completion through them both. The hall erupted in cheers, tentative at first, then growing in volume as pack members absorbed the significance of what they were witnessing. Not just a mating, but a transformation of their alpha, their pack structure, and their future. Elder Thea stepped forward, raising her hands for silence. When the hall quieted, she spoke with the authority of her position. "The moon goddess chooses wiser than we know," she declared. "What she has joined together, let no wolf tear asunder. I recognize this mate bond as true and sacred." Her formal blessing sent another wave of cheers through the hall. As Mikkal and Aria stood together before their pack, the bond between them glowed stronger than ever, a connection that had survived rejection, danger, and sacrifice to emerge unbreakable. Epilogue. 6 months later. Spring sunshine warmed the central courtyard as Aria moved among the pack members, listening to concerns, offering guidance, and occasionally settling minor disputes. Her role as alpha female had evolved naturally over the months, her innate compassion balancing Mikkal's more direct leadership style. The pack had adapted to the changes with surprising ease. Initial skepticism about an Omega in leadership had faded as Aria demonstrated her value, not through dominance, but through understanding, mediation, and an uncanny ability to sense deception through her bond with Mikkal. Alpha female, a young beta called, approaching with a respectful nod. The delegates from the Eastern Packs have arrived for the Alliance Council. Thank you, Kira, Aria replied. Please show them to the reception hall. I'll join them shortly. As the beta hurried away, Aria felt the familiar warmth of Mikkal's approach through their bond. She turned to find him watching her from the entrance to the courtyard, pride evident in his expression. You've become quite the diplomat, he observed, crossing to her side. I learned from the best, she replied with a smile. Though I still prefer working with the pack directly rather than formal negotiations. Mikkal took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. That's why we make a good team. You understand the people. I handle the politics. Together they walked toward the main pack house, where representatives from 5 neighboring packs awaited them. The Silver Moon Pack had flourished under their joint leadership, growing stronger as old hierarchies gave way to a more balanced structure that valued all members' contributions. Did you finish with the new training program? Aria asked as they walked. Mikkal nodded. The first class includes 3 Omegas. They are showing remarkable aptitude, especially in strategy and reconnaissance. Martha will be pleased. It was her idea to include Omegas in scout training. Your old mentor has proven to be one of our wisest advisors, Mikkal acknowledged. Though she still terrifies half the council. Aria laughed, the sound bright in the spring air. As she should. They paused at the entrance to the pack house, taking a moment before stepping into their formal roles. Mikkal's hand tightened around hers, his expression growing serious. Are you happy, Aria? He asked quietly. With all of this? The question surprised her. Of course. Why do you ask? Sometimes I wonder if I've asked too much of you, thrust you into a position you never sought. Aria reached up, touching his face gently. Through their bond she sent waves of contentment and certainty. I never sought to be alpha female, that's true, but I always sought to matter, to contribute, to be seen. Her smile softened. You gave me that and more. Mikkal turned his face to kiss her palm, his eyes never leaving hers. The moon goddess knew what she was doing when she chose you for me. For us, Aria corrected. She chose us for each other. As they entered the pack house together, side by side as equals, Aria reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from invisible Omega to alpha female, from rejection to acceptance, from loneliness to belonging. The Silver Moon Pack watched their leaders pass, respect evident in every face. Not just for their alpha, as tradition had always dictated, but for the mate bond that had transformed their pack. A bond between the highest and the lowest that had proven stronger than hierarchy, politics, or tradition. In the end, it wasn't about alpha or omega at all. It was about two wolves who completed each other, their strengths and weaknesses perfectly balanced, their bond unbreakable, just as the moon goddess had intended all along.